In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man from Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Now, any story is easier when you can see it. Mahlon and Chilion, no. We're going to assign actors to each of these characters. All right? So, let's look at Naomi. And I'm not using an actor for their character, just their physical appearance. But I'm going to make it a little more difficult on myself. I'm going to use only Jewish actors. Okay? So, for Naomi, it's Bette Midler. Good. Naomi is Bette Midler. Now you see Naomi.
I can't picture Naomi looking like that.
All right. So Naomi is
We're acting like her.
Bette Midler. No, see, that's what I'm saying. I'm not using their personalities, just their appearance, because they're actors. All right. Naomi is Bette Midler. Elimelech doesn't matter. He's a footnote. I will say his name in Hebrew means "my God is king," which is a pretty cool name, Elimelech. Also, Mahlon and Chilion. We're not even going to worry about assigning those guys roles. They're footnotes. They're in the text scroll that comes up before the movie. All movies do that, right? It's not just Star Wars. So, Mahlon and Chilion, their names mean sickness and wishing. Not important characters. But Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion, Elimelech dies. Mahlon and Chilion marry Moabite women. One of them is named Ruth. The other, her name is Orpah. Ruth is it's a cute little Hebrew name. It could be pronounced Root with a hard T or Ruth with a soft T, depending on how the word is dotted. And it means friend or companion. Okay? Orpah is a Hebrew word. And I looked at this and I thought, why in the world, how does that have any relevance to the story? Orpah means the back of the neck. Well, Ruth we understand because she's a companion. Naomi we understand because her name means pleasant. And Elimelech we like because he's got a really cool name. And then sickness and wishing die off. But we've got, because they were sick and they were wishing for something else. Yeah, apparently so. So the 2 Moabites, these 2 took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah and the other Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. Both Mahlon and Chilion died. Then Naomi arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard that in the fields of Moab, that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. The plague, the drought, is over that drove them into Moab out of Israel. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to each of her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. They said to her, "No, we will return back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I have a husband this night, and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying?" Why is this an issue? Why can't they just go back and marry other Jewish men, right? Because Elimelech owned property. Elimelech's property should have passed to Mahlon and Chilion, but they died. It should have passed to their children, but they didn't have any. So now we've got Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. Under Jewish law, they can only claim the property that belongs to the male side of their house if they marry within the tribe. But Naomi is not going to remarry. She feels she's too old or whatever. And so since she can't remarry, since she can't produce more sons for Ruth and Orpah to marry, they're not going to get the inheritance that comes down. In other words, if Ruth and Orpah go back to Israel with Naomi, they're going to be poor and destitute. They're going to be in absolute poverty. So Naomi decides that the best thing for her to do is to send them back. The two girls weep, but Naomi makes a very good case. If you come with me, you're going to be poor and destitute your whole life. "No, my daughters, it is exceedingly bitter for me that for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back." Now we begin to understand Orpah's name. She turned around and walked away, and all they saw was the back of her neck leaving. Okay. Each of us, our names mean something, and whatever that is an important. It's God who gives our parents our names. Anyway, so there's this beautiful passage where Naomi urges Ruth to go back, and Ruth says, "For wherever you will go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Okay, so there's this beautiful passage where Ruth, who is not Jewish, joins herself to Naomi, who is. So the two of them go and they come to Bethlehem. Verse 19 says, "The whole town was stirred because of them." Why is the whole town stirred because of them? Elimelech was wealthy. He had a lot of land. He couldn't work it because of the drought or whatever. But here they come back, and these are rich people who are suddenly impoverished because they have no claim to the land. They have this massive fortune that they cannot touch. And so, of course, the whole town is just stirred with excitement because of them. So, verse 22. Naomi returned, and Ruth, her Moabite daughter, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Barley is the least valuable crop in Israel. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. All right, now we have another actor on the stage, right? We've got, I did not assign Ruth a character. Because I love Natalie Portman so much, and because she's Jewish, even though Ruth isn't Jewish, forget that. Because I love Natalie Portman so much, Natalie Portman is Ruth. Now, we come to Boaz. And who is Boaz? Boaz is a wealthy landowner. Boaz is a rich noble. Boaz is probably a close cousin of Elimelech. Boaz is Harrison Ford. Okay, so Harrison Ford owns this land, and Ruth goes out to glean in the fields. What does that mean? There was no state welfare system, but God, through Moses, instituted the law of the reaping. That the reapers were allowed to go through their fields one time, and they were supposed to be sloppy. And anything they didn't get on their first pass was left for the poor. So the poor would come into the fields behind the reapers, and they would gather up grain to eat. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go into the field and glean among the ears of grain, after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. And he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." And Boaz said to his young men, and who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather after the sheaves, after the reapers." And so she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. So, not only does Boaz notice her because of her beauty, but he receives good reports of her diligence. She works very hard from morning until now, except for a short rest. She works very hard. Cannot stress this enough. Not only is she beautiful, she's hardworking. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." So Boaz gives her a special blessing. He says, "You stay in my field and I will take care of you. We will make sure you have plenty to eat, and I will make sure you have plenty to drink, and no one will harass you." So, let's see. Verse 13, then she said to Boaz, "I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. And when she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." He's saying, hey, I like her. Let her do whatever she wants. And make sure you drop extra bundles on the ground so that she can have enough. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave to her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." And she told her mother-in-law she had worked with with whom she had worked, she said, "The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi said to her, "This man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." One of our redeemers. What does that mean? A redeemer is someone who can purchase the land. If the redeemer were to take Ruth as a wife and raise sons with her, then the land that belonged to Elimelech would pass to her. She would go from being impoverished to having all of Elimelech's wealth for herself. Between her and Naomi, they would go from destitute to wealthy almost immediately. Now, Naomi, being a good Jewish mother, says, "I'm going to hook these two up." Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz a relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight. Therefore, wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say I will do." We're Gentiles. What does that mean? I have heard this preached badly before. I have heard this taught badly before. I have heard this taught as a rape scene. I have heard this taught as sexual seduction. I have heard this taught as every horrible, nasty, disgusting thing you can imagine, because we're Gentiles and we don't understand. But Naomi knew. Naomi knew exactly what she was telling Ruth to do, and so did Boaz. Why? Because they're Jewish. And I'm going to have to stop soon. I'm not going to get through the whole book today. We'll finish it next week. They're Jewish. So let me give you just a hint of what this is all about. See, Ruth actually does go to the threshing floor, and she waits until evening, and she watches where Boaz lies down, and she goes to him in the middle of the night, and she says, "Spread your garment over me." And Boaz promises her that he will. What's the garment about? Whenever Christ uses the clothing idiom, he's always talking about a cloak of righteousness, a garment of righteousness. The first place we see clothes in the Bible is when God takes away the man-made fig leaf covering, and he gives Adam and Eve animal skins to cover their nakedness. Clothing is a very important Levitical symbol. When Ruth says, "Spread your garment over me," what she's saying is, "Spread your house over me." At this time in history, the edges of your garments, the edges of your robe, had a special pattern woven into them. They were woven in such a way that it was unique to each house. And in a largely illiterate society, the way you would sign a document is by pressing the hem of your garment into a clay seal, and that would signify that this is from a member of this house. Later on, we make signet rings, and we've got the king's signet, and it happens later in the New Testament, or in the Old Testament rather. But right now, at this point in history, it's the edge of the garment. What Ruth is asking for is to be taken into the house of Boaz. Now, Does Ruth know this? I don't think so. I don't think Ruth has any idea what she's asking. I think she loves her mother-in-law so much that she's willing to do whatever Naomi says, even if it doesn't make sense to her. Ruth is therefore a symbol of the church. We are Gentiles like Ruth is. Naomi is Jewish. She is a symbol of Israel. Naomi knows about Boaz. Ruth has never met Boaz, but Naomi knows about him. Who is Boaz? Boaz then is the Lord of the harvest. Nowhere in the story do Naomi and Boaz meet until Ruth introduces Naomi to Boaz. If Boaz is the Lord of the harvest, he's a type of Christ. If Ruth is a Gentile, she's a type of the church. If Naomi is Jewish, she's a type of Israel. Israel teaches the Gentiles about the Lord of the harvest. The Lord is introduced to Israel by the church. This story, it's so full and so thick, and I'm already way over time. But we'll finish this next Sunday morning. This is the romance of redemption. Who is Ruth to Boaz? She's his bride. And we'll get there. We'll get there. Next week. Would you bow your hearts with me for a closing word of prayer?